You run a marketing platform or a sales platform and you're not your best customer, you're not doing it right.
And if you can connect all of that and make sense of like who's in market, that's obviously super valuable.
We have a data set of 18.8 million records. You sending them an email is not going to put them into market to go buy.
Insights into the innovations and revolutions of the marketing world. Welcome to the Marketing Scientists Podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Marketing Scientists. Today's a special one. We are going to talk to Carrie Cunningham from SixSense. Yes. So we're going to get into all things intent and what does that really mean for B2B businesses. Kerry has a prolific background. He spent time at SiriusDecisions at Forrester before joining SixSense in a research and thought leadership capacity. So he knows a thing or two about what's happening with B2B. Let's tune in and let's get to know Kerry, and I'll see you on the other side. Kerry, this is going to be, I think, one of our most popular episodes. I can already kind of guess.
So,
and the reason I say that is I think there's a lot of confusion and, potentially even misinformation, disinformation about what, you all do at SixSense, and also the whole transformation that we've had in the last few years around signals and intent and what do all of these things mean, and people have, different interpretations of them. So I'm really excited about digging in. But I actually want to start elsewhere. I want to start with a fun question for you. So if you could go back in time from history and find an influential figure that you would want to discuss the future of marketing with, who would it be and why?
all right, well, you eliminated almost everybody I was immediately thinking of when you said future of marketing, because most of the influential people that I would want to talk to probably lived before there was such a thing as at least B2B marketing, and probably wouldn't care about it otherwise. It's interesting because I think some of the people that I would want to talk to about the future of B2B marketing would be people who would know nothing about it. And I think we could talk about my past, but I was in B2B marketing forever, left for a while and came back. And that period of time where I wasn't part of it really changed how I looked at it. So, like any of the really smart people in other fields, I think it would be fascinating to lay out what marketing is like now and then talk about, get their thoughts. But if it's somebody to talk about actually who knows B2B marketing,
you can change it up. If no name comes to mind, like we can talk about contemporaries. Like who do you look up to in terms of what's happening in B2B marketing and what's changing, and even just a contemporary. Who do you want to go pick their brains on this topic?
I think there are a lot of people doing interesting things in these days. So there are a couple of my former colleagues back at Forrester that I still think are really thinking clearly about things and helpful. So my former partner in crime, Terry Flaherty, we developed the Demand Unit Waterfall together. That was the first get the hell away from these MQL movement back in 2017. I think Ross Graber, also at Forrester, thinks really clearly about everything. And he's always a great person to bump ideas against because he'll find the gaps in the clarity of your thinking very quickly for you. And then some folks that I've had a chance to engage with a fair bit over the years who are super helpful, like John Miller, and getting up to whatever he's getting up to next. And I've had a lot of conversations with him over the years about various things that I think have been, really super useful. Not always agreeing, but that's actually what makes it fun. Plus, there are a bunch of folks that engage with online that I think are incredibly interesting and thoughtful. Liam Moroney, somebody I think everybody should read if you're interested in branding and posts and those kinds of things. And Mark Stoos, for whatever reason you might like. It might not be about B2B marketing at all, but also just a really interesting, thoughtful person. So I think there's a list of folks you could talk to.
Amazing. Great set of names. So Mark Stoos, definitely. I met him, I think, a year or two ago at an event, and really sort of resonated with his line of thinking. Liam as well, John Miller as well. These are very familiar names. So this is awesome. I just caught up with Ross a couple of weeks ago with Ian, and we had a fun chat about all things, marketing measurement. So hopefully we'll do some work together at some point. So these are great names. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned something interesting in your intro. You said that there was a time when you moved away from B2B marketing and then came back, and that time was pivotal. Let's dig in on that. What was pivotal about that period of time for you?
Yeah, so I love that story. One, because it was a happy story for me. I was part of a company for a long time. We sold the company. I had to stay with the new one for about a year, and then took some time out of B2B. So I had a nice 4+ year sabbatical, if you will. And during that time, I mostly scratched some intellectual itches that I had. My undergraduate degrees in psychology, what I'm most interested in are things in human psychology, but particularly the biological basis of behavior, evolutionary basis of behavior, anthropology, paleoanthropology, those kinds of things. Anyway, so I spent 4 years working in research labs in social sciences. One of those labs, it was a paid gig, not very much, research assistant, junior research assistant in a university research lab. Sure. And then 3 others as well over the course of the time. And I also got a graduate degree in organizational psychology during that period of time. So, and I was, I really wanted to go on and do a PhD, but this was not that long ago. This was in 2009. And I was already like, okay, at best 6 years from now, you'll be a junior professor making $60,000 a year. Is that something you can submit the people in your life to? And the answer came back no. So then anyway, I ended up in a really great situation at SiriusDecisions.
Right.
Within a year or so of finishing that sabbatical, great episode. When I came back, so like that, I was gone from B2B for almost 5 years. And it was the 5 years where marketing automation took over B2B. So when I left, it was still mostly outbound, yes, websites and some inbound, but B2B was not primarily inbound, and Marketo and Eloqua had not taken over the world yet. And then when I came back to SiriusDecisions, and SiriusDecisions was the epicenter of the demand waterfall and all the leads, the stages, and lead scoring and MQL scoring. And so I came from this environment where for almost 5 years, I was in this very rigorous data-centric, research-centric environment where you did not say things you didn't know. I mean, you could say them, but you wouldn't last very long, right? If you're going to make a claim, then it has to be backed up. And then if you're going to write something, then there are going to be lots of people who are going to look at it, and they don't necessarily have any stake in you being right, So you come from that environment back to business where it's like, I think it's 10 points for the white paper. And I think I was like, what the hell are you people smoking? I mean, this is, you definitely don't know the things that you're saying. You think maybe, but you can't possibly know these things. And so, we had arguments, fights, and these are smart people. These are people who really know their stuff, but still there's stuff about it that, especially lead scoring and MQLs and that kind of stuff, it's like, God, it just doesn't make any sense. And then, it was my job, one of them, along with my buddy Terry, to help organizations try to improve their lead management processes. Terry had already been in it for a year or so when I started, and then, I worked with him for a couple of years, and, you get to see hundreds and hundreds of organizations and what they're doing. And, a big part of our job was, like, how do we improve conversion rates? This, and this. And you just see people doing so many things that, you understand why they're doing them. they're under pressure to get the numbers up here and get the numbers up here, but you see just how obvious it is that you can turn knobs and dials and get any sort of conversion rates or, production numbers you want, and none of it means anything. And there was nobody that I could find who had done any sort of math to understand whether these things that marketing is doing at the top of the funnel have anything to do with what comes out the bottom. But what was really clear is that, from lead to revenue was like a 99% failure rate. It's like 1% of leads get from one point to the other. There's lots of different reasons for that. But, we could get our clients to go from 1% to 3% or something. But still, what part of your business do you run on a 97% failure rate, right? And that's what Terry would always talk about. And so we're trying to figure out, what is this? I mean, we would say this can't be the right unit of demand, the lead. And that's what we started talking about. That became our project, is to figure out like, what is the right unit of demand that we should be focused on. And what became clear to us slowly, I would say, over time though, but when you work with enough different customers, then one of the things that you see is over and over again is that when an organization gets an opportunity that gets into pipeline, they didn't have just one lead for that from that company. And so we started seeing that over time, and we're like, okay, well, of course they do, because marketing has multiple buyer personas, and we're actively marketing to multiple buyer personas. So then you go out and look around and say, well, is anybody counting whether multiple buyer personas show up and whether that makes a difference? And the answer is no, absolutely no. Nobody is looking at that. Like, nobody's counting it. And in fact, what you find is that if companies are getting multiple leads, it counts against marketing, because marketing's judged on their conversion rate of leads to opportunities. And if I get 2 leads from the same organization, the second one is treated like pariah. It's like, get that thing out of here. That's a duplicate. Marketing failed. That's a duplicate lead in the same organization. We can't do anything with that. And so, we even came up for a term. We called it second lead syndrome. And like, everybody had second lead syndrome, that, marketing's producing second, third, fourth leads in big accounts we're trying to market to, maybe a dozen leads from the same account. And everyone after the first one is marked as a disqualified lead or a duplicate lead. And it counts against the conversion rates. So that's, one thing. It's just terrible for marketing. And if that's all you cared about, it would, it's bad for your numbers. But then you think, well, isn't that a good sign? So, So first of all, we started thinking, okay, you know what? It's buying groups, not leads. Right. And then if it's buying groups and it's multiple people doing things, then that's another reason that we can't look just at the leads, because there's literally multiple signals from this unit of demand. And so the unit of demand is the group of people and the opportunity they represent. And that's ultimately, we made this goofily named thing called the Demand Unit Waterfall, but that's where it came from. We wanted to call it the Opportunity Waterfall, but for kind of political reasons, they wouldn't let us. They thought it sounded too much like it was going to be just for sales and not marketing.
Interesting.
And didn't want to derogate marketing. So they wouldn't let us call it the Opportunity Waterfall, and we couldn't think of something else. And so we just landed on the internal name that we'd been using, which was, the Unit of Demand Waterfall didn't work. So we call it, demand, it became the Demand Unit Waterfall, but that's what it is. The unit of demand is the thing that we were trying to identify. And I think, tooting our own horns, that's exactly right. We landed on the right unit of demand. The unit of demand is an opportunity. That opportunity consists of the need that the buyer has, the people who are in that organization who are charged with addressing that need. That's the thing you need to identify, attract, engage, and convert. That's the unit of demand. That's how we got there. That's still the unit of demand. I mean, I think that's like the fundamental unit.
That's very aligned with sort of how I think about it. So this is a really helpful history lesson for us, for me. I personally hadn't heard that sort of narrative, so this is very clarifying. And I completely agree. Like, that's how we look at it ourselves within our business. And when we're talking to our customers, we're like, hey, when does it become a real opportunity? Let's talk about that. And, because everything else before that, you can argue is a contact name and email and phone number.
Right.
And the word lead is, it can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And some people still stick on to that MQL language. But when I dig in, they've really sort of, changed the definition to be much more of a hand raiser or somebody who's like actively showing some type of a clear, explicit intent, which I think is fine. But it's when you look at that 99% failure rate, most of them are not hand raisers. That's why you have that 99% failure rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So bringing that back to, so that's a fascinating journey and fascinating lesson for everybody. I think more and more people are going down this direction of buying groups and, really looking at opportunities and pipeline and, that type of stuff. You have joined SixSense, what, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or am I
3 years?
3 years ago? Okay, so not that long. How does SixSense sort of plug into this ecosystem? And by the way, before I ask you about this question, fun story. I think a couple of your founders were in the same YC class as me in 2013 before the company was called SixSense.
Okay.
So I remember those guys from I think they were at like some media company before that or ad tech company, and they sort of started the.
Yeah, Amanda had another company, and then prior to that, she was at Cisco, and I think a couple of them were at Cisco as well.
So tell us about SixSense and how you all do what you do, and where do you plug into this whole idea of buying groups and signals and intents, and I'll have a bunch of follow-ups for you.
And I will just, if I can, just continue on the journey we were on a little bit ago, because it leads me right here. And that is that, so once we realize that the buyer is a group of people, and that at the very least they emit these signals that cause them to become leads, and that you almost always have multiple leads. And then it just dawned on us one day, oh yeah, there's another thing that we know about buyers, and that is that they don't fill out forms, that the form fill rate in B2B is like 3% or so. And so that was just that we layered that on top. And this is also at a time, this is 2016, 17, when third-party intent is just becoming a thing. So we've got third-party intent becoming a thing, and we know that the buying group is a bunch of different people. SiriusDecisions had some research about multiple buyer personas. We've got evidence from a ton of our clients that multiple people are filling out forms. And then you layer on top, all right, and that's got to be just the tip of the iceberg, because hardly anybody fills out forms. And so that just set my hair on fire, because I was like, holy shit, this whole thing looks different than, it looks so different from the way that we're engaging with it. We're engaging with it through a keyhole when it should be like a sliding glass door, and so, we started thinking about it then. The next thing, we wrote a bunch of, demand unit stuff, but then the next thing I wrote is the buyer signal framework, which was in 2017 or 18, something like that, the first time, trying to unite these things for people, because I think the great tendency in B2B is for people to want to substitute one kind of thing for the next. All right, we tried leads, that sucks. How about third-party intent? Well, now that sucks. How about anonymous traffic on your website? Oh, that sucks. Instead, what we started saying back then was, look, no, they all do suck, right? But the idea is to triangulate and to put these signals together, and together we'll have a much better signal. And everybody's, oh, that's going to be so expensive. All right, well, what you're doing right now is very, very expensive. You're experiencing the costs in a different way, but you're wasting so much time and money and energy, and you produce all these shitty experiences for your buyers. So I started being very concerned about that. Then 2018, 19, we did another buyer signal framework and built it out some more. We also, in 2019, I think it was, did a revision of the Demand Unit Waterfall, and it became the Revenue Waterfall, and we added cross-sell, upsell, and all to that. And after I did that, SixSense just recruited me and asked me if I wanted to come over. And I thought, well, I've kind of done a lot of stuff here, so why not? And the thing about SixSense is that SixSense, and what I really liked about SixSense is that SixSense collects all of those signals and uses AI to find out what they mean. And that's exactly what I've been wanting people to do for, since really 2017, is take these multiple sources of signal, run AI against them, find the patterns in what they mean, and then use that to drive behaviors. And that's exactly what SixSense does. So, and from the beginning of time, so from back, in the first inklings of SixSense, 11-ish or whatever years ago, they were third-party intent with predictive identified against it, plus identifying the anonymous visitors and what companies they're coming from on your website. And to me, once I saw the anonymous, it really did light my hair on fire because, I ran around for a long time saying, look, if you're a marketing leader, almost all of the money that you spend to bring people to your website results in anonymous traffic. And you can spend all of the time and energy you want trying to change that. I don't think you can. But what you can do is figure out what's in there and use it, take advantage of it. And so that was my talking point, one of the big ones from 2018 to 2020 or so. And I think a big part of the reason SixSense wanted me to come on board and start saying that with the logo on my chest, because that's exactly what SixSense's strength was and is and has been, is let's just extract all of the information possible from the fact that, the buyer is this big group. At first it was received, with like, oh, this sucks, it's so complex and all that. But I mean, the other side of that is, yes, but there's so much signal. Like, if you want to know if there are two people and you want to know which one's in market, there's no way that you can look at what they do on your website and tell whether their company's going to buy something. It just doesn't work that way, and there's not enough options for them on your website. It's just they're all going to do more or less the same thing. They're going to look at the same 10 web pages or whatever, and they're going to binge. And by the way, they're going to be on your website doodling while they're on a call, and who knows whether they're reading or not. And it's just really, you can't help by looking at one person what their company's going to do. But when you have all of this signal from anonymous traffic and third-party intent, plus multiple people filling out forms, now you've got so much more evidence to help point you in the right direction. And that's all I want for people. That's all.
That's awesome. Solid.
And that's what SixSense.
Oh yeah, that's a great description of the tech and the purpose of like how you go about sort of using the data. And I think it makes complete sense, right? Whatever data that you can get, and if you can connect all of that and make sense of like who's in market, that's obviously super valuable. I want to sort of get your take on some people think of this as like the holy grail, which, and I'm making the bull case for SixSense here that I think that there's tremendous value. But if you zoom out a little bit, right, that point about being in market versus not being in market, can you talk a little bit about that for the audience? Because that's not the full picture, right? Just the folks who are in market is a small part of your overall audience. How do you all think about that at SixSense?
Yeah. So, there's something that's going around and justifiably so, the 95-5 rule that is a real, piece of research from legitimate people who know what they're doing and talking about. But the phrase 95-5 is an inaccurate oversimplification of what the research says, for one thing. So the research says 5% of your audience is going to buy, 95% is not going to buy now. That's accurate, ish. It certainly isn't 95-5 for every company or for your company, but it's somewhere around there. And if you get that, if you have that in your mind, you're in the right spot. The way that people talk about it all the time is 5% are in market and 95% are not. And for low cost, high volume things, that might be true. For enterprise kinds of solutions that take a year to buy, if somebody's going to buy from you this quarter, they've been in market for 9, 10, 12 months already. And so, it seemed pretty obvious that it's not 95 out of market, 5 in. It's something else. And as it turns out, SixSense has more than 1,000 customers, and all of our customers call on thousands of companies. So we have a data set of 18.8 million records that I'm working with right now that tell us that something across all of B2B, and this set is mostly SaaS companies. So it wouldn't have, we don't have enough representation from some industries to say it absolutely applies to you, but the general rule is going to be this. Like 65, 70% of your audience is absolutely not in market right now. And if you're a SaaS company, that's really easy to get to. So if you're a SaaS company, chances are you and everybody else is on a 2-year contract, and half of the companies in the space are in year 1, right? So that's 50%. And then you take another chunk of the 50% who are in year 2 and say, they're happy, they're not out looking. Now you're probably right around 70% of accounts that are not in marketing. And important thing there is you sending them an email is not going to put them into market to go buy $50, $100, $200,000 thing or whatever, and not even a sequence of emails or ads or whatever, right? If they're not in market, they're not in market. And it's because they're not experiencing a need to go spend big money on whatever it is that you sell. But now that leaves, instead of 5%, now we've got, let's say 30% of the accounts that are great targets for you that are somewhere in a buying journey. So now our data shows that it's probably the ones that are going to buy in a quarter on average is probably more like 2 to 3%. And again, that'll depend on, how expensive the thing is, like the buying cycle. And then it also depends a lot on economic conditions. So I can see back data for kind of late 21, and late 21, that number looked like 3 or 4%. Ever since then, it looks like 1 or 2 that actually get to the purchase part of things where they buy something. And then the rest are on their way there. Some stage on the way there. So I think one of the things that everybody needs to take on board is that a lot of companies will go into market to buy your thing and never get very close to actually buying it, right? So their buying journey is going to end long before they get to the point where you're even doing demos and that kind of stuff. But they go out and market and look around. It's an important thing to keep in mind if we get to talk about why your buyers actually know you better than you think already. So there's all of that. And then, even for the ones that get to the end where they purchase something, what's your win rate against that set? So if we rounded numbers and say you've got 30% that are somewhere in market and or buying, and even if you said 5% are buying, that leaves 25%. So for every 5% that are buying, there's another 5 times that number who are in market, who are not going to get to the point where they buy something, whose journey is going to stop. So there's a lot of scale if we can figure out how to get those folks to actually just complete their buying journey, whether they do it with you or not, right? Just, that's where the scale is. It's not competing for this small slice that actually gets there. It's how do we get more of the ones that are actually, at some point they said, let's go buy something, but they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't get there. They lost the budget or something happened, right? So there's a lot of scale there.
There's a fun sales book. I'm forgetting the name of it, but I think it talked about this idea of friction or this idea of no decision, right? Like most things end in no decision, or just like, I can't, just there's something, the status quo just wins. And I think you're talking about that, right? Which is like, they just don't make a decision. They just don't get to the end of the process. Okay. This is really helpful. And thank you for sharing that, right? It's not just about that 1% that are like in market and getting to that end of the process, but it's the precursor to that. And then obviously there's a much bigger market, but they're not actively in a buying cycle, and how much energy you want to dedicate to that. And think about your marketing mix holistically about that 1%, maybe the next, 29%, and then the remaining, 70%. I want to dig into one important point. There has been a lot of discussion about third-party intent, first-party intent. Obviously, everything that is first-party can be much higher quality because, you control the data set, on your own sort of data infrastructure. There is some concern that, I personally have had, and, I'm sure you share, but maybe not, about the quality of third-party data. And the reason I talk about is like the sources of that data can sometimes be not as transparent. How do you all think about that internally when you're building this tech? Because there's value there, but how do you distinguish between the signal and the noise?
Well, yeah, I think the way to figure out signal from noise is looking for signal that coalesces. That's really the key to all of this. And this is not necessarily a technical discussion of it. It's more a philosophical discussion of it. If you've got 10 different signals where a given account shows up somewhere, an account might show up 7 different places on websites where people are talking about ERP solutions and what's new in ERP. And then 3 others where they're talking about baking and dogs and something else, right? So there's a lot of signals there, but you've got 7 signals. 3 of those signals are noise about something we don't care about. 7 signals coalesce to tell you probably, what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase the likelihood that the signal we're seeing is a real signal. And the way you do that is you add more and more disparate signals to it. It's just triangulation. It's the analogy of how your cell phone knows where you are is a really good analogy for it, right? So if there's just one cell tower that can ping your phone from where you are, you could be anywhere in a radius from that cell tower, and it can say how far you are from that point, but it really can't say where you are. If you have another one that's at a different point, then you've now cut down on the possible places where this person with a phone could be dramatically, because they're somewhere within this range and with this range. And so where those 2 overlap is where this phone is. And if you have a third one, now you dramatically reduce the error rate, right? You increase the precision and decrease the likelihood that it could be something else. So every signal that we get helps us refine what we're predicting about what that account is interested in. And that's really it. So all of the signal, and that's why, by themselves, all of the signals suck. There's no signal, even when somebody comes to your website and says, contact me.
Yeah.
They have less than like a 50% rate of even being able to get a hold of that person. And it's like, come on, you said contact me and then you hid, right?
I'll give you a fun one. Like the number of people that actually book a demo on our website and then, they come to a call, and I know within the first 5 minutes that it's probably not a good, use of their time or our time. And they'll say something like, I couldn't find pricing on your website. I'm like, it's literally in the top nav, and we are probably the only ones in enterprise SaaS that have public pricing. There's no way you can. So I'm like, I'm going to email you automatically on the day that you book a demo that here's a link to our pricing, so I don't have to, qualify you, right? You can self participate in the process or not.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with you, right? Like the even the first party data can sometimes, not be as good as you think it is. Okay, that's a very helpful clarification. I want to bring this back to how you all, do marketing and sales at SixSense. So obviously, a really interesting story. I think your CMO is now the CRO. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. That happened. That's rare, but that's a great example. So when you all are doing this internally, and I'm sure you get to sit in on a bunch of this, how do you think about marketing, sales, signals, opportunities, pipeline? Like, I'm asking a pretty broad question here, but what is it that you all look at on a quarterly or a monthly basis when you're thinking about your marketing mix and where you're going to invest your dollars, and how do you measure the success of that in the short term and the long term? Any thoughts or ideas for others? Maybe we'll take inspiration from your example.
Yeah, because this is where the rubber meets the road, and it's what SixSense does for a living. And SixSense probably, and this is so our CRO, former CMO Latany Conan, she's got a genius for a few different things. That's why she's in the position she's in. But one of them is she came to SixSense. She had been a customer before, and I think SixSense was using SixSense's own platform in some ways, kind of already. But she basically said, okay, now we're going to be the number one use case for SixSense. Everybody's going to use SixSense all the time for everything. And not only that, if you are the leader of a go-to-market function, demand, RevOps, whatever it is, you are now a customer-facing person who's going to have dozens, if not hundreds of conversations with prospects explaining how you use SixSense all the time. So that caused a lot of changes in the product, a lot of changes in how we talk about the product. To me, you run a marketing platform or a sales platform and you're not your best customer, you're not doing it right. And so I think that's hugely important. Because, and so what we're able to do, and so that's all preface to say, so we use SixSense and we say, okay, for every segment that we're interested in, every segment is put into the machine, and SixSense predicts where each account is, what stage they're in. Are they in a buying journey? Yes or no? 70% no. And then which stage are they in? Each stage is associated with a probability to become an opportunity for us, become a pipeline opportunity for us. All right. So it goes from, like 0 to 15, stage 1. And then if they're in the purchase stage at the end, it's like, between 80 and 95% becoming a pipeline opportunity for us. And so everybody in the organization has that understanding about the accounts that are in all of the stages. And so if it's a huge strategic account for us, of course, sellers their job is to go into every account and develop relationships, whether they're in a buying process or not. And that's your job. But you can't do that anywhere below the highest level, right? You're going to have to be responding, right? And so we use SixSense the way we want all our customers to do, which is when an account shifts from being not in market to in market, then they need to get a bunch of attention. And what we know from my research now is that you're going to get on the short list or not within literally days of the time that account goes into market. So you've got to get in front of them. They're not going, if you don't have a pre-existing relationship, they're not going to talk to your sales rep. So you have to, with marketing, get in front of them and make sure that they know you, they love you, you get on the short list.
Okay, very tactical question here. Have you seen, through your experience working with companies and also internally, there's a sense of like, I come from, my personal philosophy on this is a very privacy friendly philosophy, which is like, hey, I never want to come across as like I'm spying on you type of thing. And that word choice is a little bit aggressive, but you get what I'm saying. And what have you seen as successful ways to engage with that buying group when that happens, when somebody goes from out of market or in market or, progresses to that journey? It can feel a little bit icky to somebody who's not like super aggressive salesperson, right? Like reaching out.
Yeah.
What have you seen as being successful ways to kind of facilitate that intro?
So one, you're not primarily trying to get a live conversation at that point because you're not going to. If you don't already have a relationship, you're not going to get that conversation. I mean, when I say not, of course, there are exceptions, and the exceptions are going to be a few percent, right? By and large, you're not. And your efforts, if your efforts are primarily to try to get a conversation with them, what you're primarily going to be doing is annoying them. And I think especially for marketers, look at your own experience. Your own experience is, if I go into market to start looking around, the last thing I want is to get a pitch. I want to, first of all, I probably already know the companies that I'm going to be evaluating somewhat. And I want to go me, my team, the other folks, we want to gather our information, get together, figure out what we want, right? And when we're ready, we'll talk to sellers. And so what we need to do when you see they're in market, that, your prospect never needs to know that you've just seen them in market, but what needs to happen is they start seeing you everywhere, right? And you start delivering things that matter to them now. Like a month ago when they were not in market, they might have seen your demand gen stuff and completely ignored it because they don't care. They're not in market. But now we just said we had it in the budget for this year. This year is here, and now here we go. And suddenly,
Carrie, this is awesome. Yeah, no, this is great. I want to pause you here because something that you just said, right? This is not I think John Miller calls it the
gumball machine
thing, a gumball machine. Yeah. right? And that's exactly what you're saying here is, hey, this is not about just sending a bunch of email the moment people go from one stage to another stage. It's about, first, if you can even figure out if you can be top of mind, so they've already highlighted you as somebody that they want to talk to, and that makes the conversation with the seller a lot easier and faster. And this also ties back to that 70-30, right? 70-29-1, which is you got to continue investing in that 70% to some extent, so that when they enter the market and you've got that signal, now you're right to kind of facilitate that initial conversation through multiple different offers, whether that's a sales demo, whether that's a webinar, whether that's an event, whether that's something else. And okay, this is great. Really love it.
Yeah. So when they first go into market, now you've got what looks like probably of the 30% that are in market, 15 of them are just in that very early stage. And a very small fraction of those are ever going to get to the point where they buy.
Yeah.
So one, and this is new because this data is new, but I think, we need to be doing everything we can to help them get to the point where they're going to buy. And a big part of that is going to be make comparing you and your competitors easy, not hard. Make the business case for your solution and for your category of solution very clear. Align, if there are analysts and consultants or whatever in your space that are important, align to the way they talk about it. Don't make up your own shit. It's just, that just makes it harder, right? So but when they go into market there, most of them still aren't going to finish right now. If you go out to blow out the budget on that set of accounts, you're not going to have any left, and it's not going to, it's not going to optimize your output.
Yeah.
So it's still relatively low, early stage, relatively low investment in each one. But as you move through, and this is why we predict, 4 different buying stages, because we want to be able to say, well, one, the buying stages are based on likelihood of becoming an opportunity. So as they get to the 30, 40% likelihood of becoming an opportunity, now what we really want to do is make sure that that they cannot miss us. They're still probably not going to take a personal meeting. But what SixSense does, so I mentioned earlier, if you head up a department within kind of go to market, you talk to people. So our sellers are out offering, and our BDRs are offering conversations with people. Do you want to talk to our SVP of RevOps? Would you like to talk to Kerry Cunningham, former analyst? Would you like to talk to, if you're a really big account, would you like to talk to Latany? Would you like to talk to our CEO? Right? We do one-on-ones. Or we're having a dinner in your area, or we're having a virtual wine tasting. So we start blowing out the budget in a way you couldn't possibly do. If you're trying to peanut butter that across your ICP, you'd be out of business in a month. But because it's this tiny fraction now of companies that we know are in market, and if we don't have the right level of engagement from them yet, and the other thing that we do, and these things are amazing, is we sponsor a CMO.
It's very famous.
CMO coffee talk. There's, I think, 1,500 or something. I don't know what the count is right now. CMOs who are part of this community. We just sponsor it. It's something that the CMOs who are part of it really, really value. It's their chance to hang out with each other. But every one of those CMOs is getting some value from SixSense without any, no expectation of a return. So if you're a company who we see is in market and your CMO is not already a member of Coffee Talk, they're going to get an invitation. We have one for the BDR.
Oh, that's so clever.
Your BDR leader is going to get an invitation to that. We're having wine tastings. We're doing other things. So what we're doing in that period is delivering things that are of value to you and making ourselves available. Like if you want to chat, we're happy to chat, right? But we're not leading with, can I get a demo? Can I get a demo? We're a lot better than the other guys. Can I get a demo? It's building preference. So, those things make a big difference. Again, you can't, if you're trying to peanut butter that stuff all over your ICP, you can't afford to do it. And sellers are going to want to do that for every account that they have, most of which are not in market, right? So you have to have the intelligence to tell you where can you afford to do that, where you're likely to get the hit. And that's really, to me,
that's fascinating. And a follow-up point here. So when you do sort of, and this might be too detailed, but when you look at, you probably have hundreds of sellers and you have, you're trying to do sort of your territory mapping, right? Like your account selection and sort of splitting them up by salespeople. So I'm assuming you take all of this stuff into account, the buying cycle stuff, when you're doing that allocation to make sure that every rep has some amount of, in market versus out of market type of deals?
I'm mostly ICP predictions. So we use SixSense to identify segments and understand how many strong ICP fits, medium ICP fits are in each area. They're mostly divided up by that because we don't know in advance which ones are going to be in market. But one of the things we can do over time is say, well, and we have vertical teams as well. So, a vertical team might need more or might need fewer accounts in their territory based on how likely it is that an account in that segment is going to go into market. Same thing with a commercial space account. We can know how many accounts in our commercial segment are likely to go into market and likely to buy in a quarter. And so instead of guessing just based on the number of good fit accounts, we can put that into the equation. But still, the number one divider is going to be how many really great fit accounts are there. And then most segments, most verticals, the number of in-market accounts is going to look more or less the same. That seems to be a pretty constant.
Right. It's randomized.
By price of deal. So you look across the kind of deal size segments, and that's what it looks like.
Very cool. Kerry, this was fantastic. I want to ask you a bunch of rapid fire questions and see your hot takes on some of these as a way to wrap up. So I'm just going to go quickly and tell me what the first thing that comes to mind, punchy stuff. So we're looking for top of mind stuff. Okay. What's your favorite tool or app right now?
Favorite tool or app? ChatGPT. I mean, there's just no question. Yeah.
Okay. You said ChatGPT. You didn't say Claude or Llama or Gemini or DeepSeek. So ChatGPT it is.
ChatGPT mostly because it was better than the others when I was trying them out, probably 15 months ago. And we pay for it, and so I'm sick of it, but it's been,
there we go.
It has continually gotten better, and we use it in so many different ways for so many different things. I mean, I can't imagine crank out a lot of content. We don't have it do any of the writing of content for us, but it saves us so much time in assessing data. One of the things that our chops and stats are pretty good. But we make sure that we bump every idea that we have for a way to analyze something, just to test.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Second one. What is the most exciting trend you are following in marketing right now?
To me, I think it's actually that I think people are starting to pay attention to the fact that in B2B, we need to do brand level marketing.
Amazing. Does brand perform?
Yes, but not on the time scale that you would like to measure it. Not you, but you generally. Yeah.
That's perfect. What's your take on attribution?
Dumber and dumbest. So love it. And you could do first touch, last touch, and multi-touch in that order or something. I don't know, whichever order you want to do it in. But lead-based attribution is among the worst ideas that B2B has had. So it's just got to be... Sorry, but it's more complex than that. And when you try to fit a very simple answer to a complex problem, what you get is misinformation rather than information.
Well, there you go. That was Kerry. Kerry, thank you for coming on. I loved learning from you and honestly got a ton of value from you. So thank you for sharing the insights, how SixSense works, how all this third-party, intent signals work, and how you also enable customers. So how can people follow you? Is it mostly LinkedIn? Or are you on any other platform? Yep.
Yeah, no, just LinkedIn. So easy to find. There's not that many Carrie Cunninghams on LinkedIn, so pretty easy to find. And I post a lot. And then you can get from there to our website. So we have a domain on SixSense, which is Science of B2B. Completely different branding, no forms, nothing. All of the research we publish is freely available. Video, short form, long form, the whole thing. So yeah,
that's awesome. I did not know that. So perfect ending for this Marketing Scientist podcast. And I'm glad I had you on, and we'll share the links with our audience as well. Thank you again, Kerry, and we'll maybe do this again in a few months and talk about a new topic.
We've got some new research coming out, so I'm happy to come back. I really enjoyed it.
All right, that was Carrie Cunningham. As you could tell, this was a fantastic lesson into the history of the MQL and the anti-MQL squad that is developing. So go give Kerry a follow on LinkedIn and tune in again next week for another episode.